Story 1. You are not going to get any real answers here. It is all going to be third-person speculation. That is, you did not ask me, but here is what they think. Story 2. There is an Associated Press article from today that addresses this question. Basically, they trust the Republican Party more than their own religion, which leads to needing to ignore certain Christian tenets in order to support Donald Trump policies that conflict with those tenets. Story 3. I fell for Donald Trump's lies when he first ran because I had no idea who he was or why he was so hated. After seeing him mock a disabled reporter on cable news network, I was horrified and deeply embarrassed. After that day, I vowed to never be tricked like that again. Story 4. They just say any of the bad information is false, created by the opposing political side, and do not provide further explanation. Story 5. These are the same so-called Christians who support the Republican Party, even though the platform is literally the antithesis of many of Christ's teachings. Story 6. As a Christian, I can say there are no truly devout Christians who support Donald Trump. True Christians know he goes against everything Jesus taught. Story 7. No honest answer will be received. The man essentially condemned the church that asked him to show mercy to those who are less fortunate upon being inaugurated. He called the preacher a radical left lunatic. It is unbelievable that anyone would consider him, a man who has objectified women and committed acts of sexual assault, a man of God. Absolutely insane. Story 8. A legitimate response I've heard is that he is like Cyrus in the Bible, a sinner but loved by God anyway. Of course, that's a great cop-out to support whoever you want. Killed a man? Beat their wife? Shot a dog? Just say Cyrus like a Harry Potter spell and they are absolved, my friend. The spell doesn't work on serious atrocities like Colin Kaepernick's knee on football grass and the like. Story 9. Compartmentalization, transactional logic, and selective reading. Tada, mystery solved. You cannot possibly understand Matthew chapters 5 through 7 and support someone like Donald John Trump without major cognitive dissonance. It is a blueprint for humility, mercy, peacemaking, honesty, turning away from anger, and not hoarding wealth or power, none of which he embodies. Faith becomes layered over tribal loyalty. They will reinterpret scripture through that lens rather than the other way around, leading to a grand display of hypocrisy. Humans are Olympic-level mental gymnasts when it comes to reconciling belief with convenience. The Sermon on the Mount demands one thing, and political survival instincts demand another. Story 10. You mean give them more political power than they have ever had in modern America? How do they look past that? Story 11. I'm Christian, but I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. Like another person said, a lot of it is the pro-life stance that Republicans generally have. If liberals had pro-life stances, you would probably see a lot more Christians on that side. Also, they see him as a strong male Christian, which I only see as true in one of those aspects. Edit. You obviously didn't read the rest of my comment. I don't support Donald Trump, nor am I pro-life. I understand some mothers have no choice a lot of the time and feel like they have to. I'm merely explaining why certain Christians vote for him. Story 12. You want someone to swallow their pride and admit they were wrong. Let us wait and see who comments. Story 13. These posts are a waste of time. There is no reasoning with followers and dishonest individuals. Story 14. The purpose of Christianity is not to help you become a better person. The purpose of Christianity is to help you feel better about being a deeply flawed person. Story 15. A family member stated, "He is just flawed. It made me sick." Story 16. As my aunt said, "Well, he can just ask for forgiveness." Hold on, are you saying anyone can do the most terrible things and all they have to do is ask for forgiveness? That is not right. Story 17. There are many devout Christians who support genocide and white supremacy for some reason. I do not know which religious text endorses that idea. Story 18. Devout Christians who support Donald Trump believe absurdities and commit atrocities. Story 19. It depends on how you define devout Christian. In my case, I haven't been to a church in years because they are either inactive or extreme. The last one I attended had a preacher speaking about the evils of yoga. I took my yoga poses and walked out. I was raised in the Deep South in a very religious family that thought interracial marriage was wrong, believed that gay people should be isolated and harmed, and supported the idea that the South would rise again. I was in the Young Republicans, and some of my best friends growing up are now Republican politicians and lobbyists. I often see personal photos with Donald Trump in my friends' social media feeds. If I had stayed there, I probably would have supported the Make America Great Again movement. It wasn't until I moved elsewhere that I became friends with people from diverse backgrounds, including gay, transgender, Jewish, and Black individuals who were not influenced by the evangelical movement. This led me to reevaluate and rebuild my faith. Now, I consider myself a committed Christ follower, which means I try to treat all people as Jesus did, with unconditional love, empathy, and respect. To answer your question, I knew years before Donald Trump ran for office that he did not demonstrate the character of someone who respects and values others. I would never vote for a narcissist like him, especially after being raised by one. Donald Trump reminds me too much of my father. I have been horrified to see my old friends and family rationalize everything he has done for their version of the greater good, which is to shape everything in their image of what they consider biblical. They are blinded, and only a profound and significant change to the social order that breaks them out of their echo chambers will change that. They are not people of peace. They are people of death and war who worship wealth and power. Story 21. They are not Christians. 2. I do not care how they get past things. Story 21. No devout follower of Jesus supports Donald Trump. They most definitely have a New Testament that presents a version of him as the antithesis of what is written about Christ in the Bible. Jesus would simply say, "I never knew you." As mentioned above, their worship and love of him contradict everything Jesus ever taught. Politics has replaced faith, and that is how they justify their behavior. Story 22. Nobody who supports Donald Trump can call themselves a true Christian. Story 23. Well, their deity tells them to be liberal, and they rebel against this guidance. Therefore, they are not true even to themselves. Story 24. Pretty much every religious person believes that what is best for them is what the Lord above desires. This belief also gives them permission to lecture others on their failings in their holy eyes. Story 25. It is a bit of a paradox because how can you be a devout Christian if you support the opposite of Jesus's teachings? Story 26. Literally no one actually answered the post, so let me as a Christian conservative. The answer is not because Donald Trump is good. It was more like Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris are bad. You have to understand the values that Christians uphold. Pro-life, God in school, and family values. The problem is, the political left is directly opposed to these tenets of Christian belief. They are very pro-abortion, very against God in school, and support lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals over traditional families. So, from a Christian perspective, why even consider supporting Kamala Harris? Donald Trump is not a good person. No one truly believes that. But what my friends and colleagues believed is that through him, their values will finally be supported. Anyways, release the Epstein files. Story 27. You cannot say you are a Christian while taking away food and healthcare. Story 28. Reddit is famously known for all of the devout Christians that come here. Story 29. How do Christians look past all the things the church has said and done? Story 30. I don't, but my parents do. They heard, not letting poor people take our tax dollars. And that was all it took. For my part, I think he is the Antichrist. My mom, meanwhile, wants to buy a Tesla and told me to get off social media when I pointed out he is a Nazi. Story 31. Trump gave the evangelicals significant influence, and they provided Trump with full loyalty and support. Story 32. Don't bother. I have asked before in my strongly conservative parish in my strongly conservative state of Louisiana. You will mostly get the imperfect vessel defense or he does not support killing babies. Story 33. My parents are in their mid-70s. They are very religious, and I am almost certain they voted for Donald Trump. They simply do not follow national news at all, so they have no idea about the things that Donald Trump says and does. They have lived their entire lives in a small farming town and only know about news that happens there. I doubt they know much about politics in general. Whenever I talk to them and mention something terrible that Donald Trump said or did, they just stare at me in confusion because they have no idea what I am talking about. Story 34. I was raised in the American evangelical tradition and spent a large portion of my adult life studying my religion. I still consider myself Christian but have moved away from traditional evangelicals. I have never voted for Donald Trump. My best explanation, ignoring the obvious Christian in name only white nationalists, is this: American evangelicalism has several severe blind spots when it comes to politics. 1. Most churches reaching for almost a century have focused on our personal relationship with God. The focus is on building a future kingdom in heaven and casting aside the cares of this world. The emphasis is on perseverance through trial to get to the other side, and less on correcting the issues that cause suffering. 2. As a result, social justice as a concept is quite foreign. In white churches, black evangelicals have clung to this much more tightly as a community, which is why many of them still skew liberal. In theory, we talk about loving our neighbors, but it is discussed in personal one-on-one terms, not as a concept like fixing homelessness or poverty. 3. This leaves a gap in the church's teaching, namely what to do in this life while preparing for the next. Praying regularly and studying the Bible only gets you so far, especially when the study of the Bible is often very surface level and does not take into context much of the tradition and history that the American church often ignores. 4. This gap has, for many, been filled by political movements like the Moral Majority and Fox News. For many who do not care for politics, it is easy to bury your head in the sand, pray for the world, and just hope Jesus comes back soon. Fox News and similar sources constantly ring the doomsday bell, so it is going to happen any day now. So why worry about the future? It is in God's hands, and He does not expect anything from me but to trust Him. Not true, but I digress. 5. As a result, they have no sense of civic responsibility and are easy to fall into lies from con men because they are conditioned to trust the Lord and their leaders. Then when something happens to break that trust, it also breaks their faith. It is a tidy little trap. I could write a book on the damage the Left Behind series did to American evangelical theology. You can blame a huge amount of everything wrong with United States conservatives on that book. Story 35. They are all hypocrites and have no problem with Donald Trump being a pedophile. Most of their religious leaders are as well. Story 36. There are no devout Christians who support Donald Trump. If a Trump supporter claims to be a devout Christian, they are pretending to be one. Christianity has been weaponized by unacceptable people. They are often not very thoughtful and hide behind the cross when they do wrong things. Donald Trump embodies neither the American way nor Christianity. Story 37. They were manipulated on abortions many years ago and influenced their children to be manipulated as well. That is what it is. Nothing more. The Republican Party is objectively not fiscally conservative. The Republican Party is objectively not in favor of smaller government. The Republican Party is objectively not supportive of free markets. Story 38. I am a Christian and I strongly dislike that person. Free the Italian brother too. God removed men like Donald Trump from the church, and I say we do the same. Story 39. I think you mean the things he continues to do. I can see forgiving past sins, but perpetuating evil is unforgivable. Story 40. If you are okay with what he has and is doing, you are a fake devout Christian. No person with standards, morals, or integrity would like or support this person. God knows who you really are. Story 41. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that request. Story 42. These questions are unproductive to ask on Reddit. You will not find devout Christians or supporters of Donald Trump, or a combination of both, who will honestly answer because Reddit users tend to dogpile and downvote such responses into oblivion. Story 43. They are neither devout Christians nor just Christians. They are hateful, racist, fascist-enabling, pedophile-enabling, evil, mean-spirited individuals. Story 44. They always say something like, "He is an instrument of the Lord, and the Lord works in mysterious ways." Story 45. Related to many of them, party above all else or reveal true selves at last. They do not care. Story 46. Where does it say you shall not worship orange felons? Evangelicals, probably. Story 47. My mother considers herself a devout Christian and will vote for Donald Trump every time because he will stop Muslims from implementing Sharia law here in America. And that is more important to her than anything else. She told me that 2 weeks ago. Story 48. Honestly, my opinion is that the answer is pretty simple. They are sycophants who do whatever the church tells them is the moral thing, even if it is against their own interests or the interests of the people they care about. Religion and logic do not really go together that well. There are exceptions to the rule, fortunately. My mom is extremely religious but hates Donald Trump and has traditionally leaned towards the more progressive side of issues like lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. I am not sure we would agree on things like abortion rights, but I will take what I can get. Story 49. I am seeing a lot of no true Scotsman arguments. I am sorry, but between evangelicals and Catholics, a super minority, if not the majority, support what he has done. You do not get to say no true Christian. Story 50. If you are religious and you think Donald Trump is being successful right now, is it because of negative things? He is destroying your local economy. Story 51. I work with one of these people. The answer is they refuse to believe anything the media says about him unless it is positive. Story 52. Basically, they capitalize on his scandals and call it character development. Story 53. Someone recently said it best, I think, Christian does not mean good person. Story 54. If someone is a devout Christian, then they absolutely believe in good versus evil, heaven and hell. Those devout Christians should realize that they are definitely going to hell for supporting Donald Trump. Story 55. You cannot look past it, plain and simple. Even if you could overlook his past of molesting women, befriending perverts, engaging in crooked business dealings, and cheating on and beating his wives, you are blatantly going against biblical principles by supporting what he is doing with immigration, rounding up people who are not even here illegally and putting them in prisons indefinitely. The Bible is clear. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. He sows hatred. Both political parties could reasonably work together, but his hate-mongering is infectious, and that is no longer the case. He has destroyed our country. He is the devil's handmaid, made more powerful by the wicked sinners who call themselves Christians and vote for him. Let them answer to that on Judgment Day. Story 56. I have no idea how they do it, but a large portion of my conservative supporters are of the opinion that he is the lesser of two evils. At least he says and does things that they think are to their benefit, while the Democratic Party says things like, "We have to punch these SOBs in the mouth." It is not hard to figure out who they will vote for, even if they don't fully agree with him. I work with many older conservative white males, and none of them agree with everything he does, especially how he does it. Story 57. If an actual Trump-supporting Christian responds, I will eat my hat. Story 58. I was told by someone, I do not like him as a person, but I like his agenda. Story 59. Third-hand answer from someone who asked a relative exactly this question. A combination of, well, the other person did far worse, and it is all lies spread by the other person. Story 60. I think you've added an apostrophe, but you don't need it. Devout Christians that support, plural of Christians. Definitely what you meant to write. Devout Christians that support implies there is a person called Christian who is supporting, etc. But even that is not correct because it is a possessive without a target, for example, Christian's house. Story 61. You have to love how Christians have come here to explain that they were tricked by false information propaganda. Meanwhile, they fully support January 6th. Not many months ago, they were driving around, screaming and waving offensive flags. Yes, they blame Fox News and former President Donald Trump, as if they are not raving lunatics one step away from resurrecting their Davidian branch, just like Alex Jones and Bo Gritz. Story 62. If they support Donald Trump, they are not followers of Christ. They are just terrible people. Story 63. I do not know why anyone makes these AskReddit posts. Do you really think the people you are addressing are going to answer in good faith, or even at all? Because they are not. They are hiding in their safe spaces and will likely never see these questions. If they do, they will ignore them, probably laughing at you for even asking, thinking you are triggered. These questions accomplish nothing except allowing people who are not the intended audience to rightfully mock those people. Story 64. In the same way, they easily overlook the content in the Bible that they do not like and cherry-pick the content that fits their narrative. Story 65. Let us be real. Devout Christians who support Donald Trump are not truly Christian. They are merely pretending to be righteous while spreading the most heinous rhetoric humanity has ever composed. Story 66. You are not going to get anywhere with this love. They think empathy is a sin. Story 67. Stop pretending this is some aberration, some departure from good Christianity. Christians tortured and murdered countless women on the pretext that they were witches or possessed. Christians excused slavery because it was part of their central tenets that they were God's people and it was an activity in their holy writings. Christians took untold wealth from different parts of the planet and defended it because those people living there were savages. This is not a departure from Christianity. This is the true face of Christianity. Story 68. My mother-in-law is a Baptist and a supporter of Donald Trump. Every time we ask her how she can support an unchristian action from Donald Trump's administration, she tries to change the subject. She knows what he is doing is wrong, and she does not want to hear us point that out to her because she supports and agrees with his actions. You know that bumper sticker? If you actually believe in God and you support Donald Trump, you better be wrong. Story 69. With the same hypocrisy that their religion encourages. Story 70. They ignore the immoral actions of their own God, so ignoring Donald Trump's immorality is not too hard for them. Story 71. Devout Christians are not known for critical thinking. Most have not read the book they claim to believe. Story 72. None of them will respond to this post. There is no biblical justification for support of Donald Trump or the prosperity gospel. Story 73. Devout Christians are, by definition, delusional and unreliable as a source for opinions on reality or topics that may involve objective facts, as they have chosen to ignore reality and exist in a fantasy world. Story 74. You are asking a group of people in a book club who did not read the book why they hold someone accountable to the book. They do not. Story 75. We are witnessing how the German people allowed Adolf Hitler to force Jewish people onto the trains. Story 76. They do not care about any of the horrible actions he has taken. My mother said, he was chosen by God to save this country, so how can anything he does be bad? Even when he does things they opposed in the past, her reasoning was, he might be doing the same things, but the Democrats did them for evil reasons, not righteous ones. Religion is a stain on humanity. Despite the good it can and has done, it has caused even more harm. Story 77. I'm a housekeeper for an elderly couple, both in their 90s. He was a chemist with over 80 patents. They are Christians. The gentleman probably won't be around much longer. He shuffles from his bed to the breakfast table and then to his office where he reads Revolver News. In the kitchen and den, the televisions are always on Fox News. They are living in a different reality than we are. The news they consume is the opposite of the truth. At first, I was baffled that such an intelligent man, one with books about propaganda on his bookshelf, could support Donald Trump. I can only assume he is in cognitive decline. The pleasant young ladies on Fox News would not lie. They are such nice young ladies. These people are still living in the 1960s. They literally have a 30-year-old bottle of lotion in their bathroom. Story 78. A devout Christian who supports Donald Trump is a paradox. It is impossible. Story 79. Former Christian but never been a Donald Trump supporter. Most of my family is incredibly religious to a fault. The ones that are also conservatives believe that Donald Trump was literally chosen by God, and they are fully willing to ignore everything else that points to the conclusion that he is a terrible person. They will not dive any deeper into it than that. Story 80. Because they are Christians, God drowned the entire population at one point. They do not care. Story 81. Religion is a mind virus with a cult of personality at its center. People who are religious already have that frame of mind. It is the same process. Story 82. What I heard one of my deeply religious extended family members say. Isn't it amazing that God can use such a flawed person to fulfill his vision? I had to leave the room before I said something that would have disrupted the family dynamic forever. Story 83. I wish I knew. It makes no sense to me. I stopped listening and walked away. Story 84. Are they, or is that what the media is telling you? I cannot answer it because the facts have been buried by the media. Story 85. It is not that Democrats have policies that conservative Christians support just because Donald Trump is an unlikable person. The Republican Party still has the policies that Christians prefer, even if you perceive those policies to be hypocritical or not aligned with your view of Christianity. Story 86. I'm a Christian but not evangelical. As such, I cannot hate anyone, and I try to live up to that. That being said, I despise Donald Trump and am one step away from hating him. Recently, an acquaintance of mine, a strong supporter of Donald Trump, said he was thrilled with him and that this is exactly what he voted for. In his view, Donald Trump has closed the border, made Jerusalem the capital, which aligns with certain biblical prophecies, and made abortion illegal again. When I try to reason with him about the many reasons Donald Trump is a stain on the presidency, he calls me a baby killer. One person who came to his defense told me I had no right to judge Donald Trump and that only God could do that. I pointed out that Donald Trump is the president and that I absolutely could and should judge the person leading our country, but I doubt she was convinced. Story 87. They support individuals with bigoted, misogynistic, and racist views, so they approve of everything he is doing. Story 88. Stop calling these people Christian. It is an insult to the word. These are cultists caught in a cult of personality. They have sacrificed all the tenets of their religion to make the man they support happy. At best, they are fools. At worst, they are mentally ill. It is easy to tell which is which because the fools all now apologize after they figure it out. The mentally ill just keep believing. Story 89. I am not American and do not support Donald Trump, but I am Christian and can say that people I know who support him acknowledge his shortcomings but see him as closer to a pro-life stance. Story 90. I was taught that liberals are communists and non-Christians. People are trained their whole lives to believe that switching teams is synonymous with abandoning their faith. Story 91. I know some genuine Christians who believe Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Story 92. My mother dismisses it as God used imperfect men throughout the Bible. Story 93. Well, I used to be a devout Christian. My fellow church members all had Donald Trump's ethics and put a great deal of effort into hiding that, using their religion as a disguise. My somewhat educated guess is that he is making their lives less complicated by giving them permission to stop pretending. Story 94. As someone who came from that demographic, I can say that fundamentalist Christians who are focused on enforcing their beliefs through politics are not true Christians. Theologically, they are worshippers of the golden calf. They do not worship God or Christ, but instead worship money and themselves. More specifically, they worship their idea of socioeconomic and cultural ethnicity. This strain of fundamentalism dates back to the Anabaptist movements that arose in the early days of the Reformation. Martin Luther made the gospel available to all, including the new and growing moneyed class of low-born people who wielded financial power but not actual political power due to the feudal system. This was a philosophy that removed power from the aristocracy and allowed this new class to reshape faith in their own image. It just so happened that all the things now considered holy and good aligned with their actions. Being hardworking but obsessed with financial status, violently anti-tax, and viewing any loss of wealth or power to the state as a threat to their own dominance. Additionally, anything that took money out of their pockets, such as helping the needy, was seen as evil. Therefore, they are heretical apostates and have been for over 500 years, and none of them will see the light of heaven. Story 95. As long as Donald Trump enacted his agenda, they do not care. Religion is a business. Story 96. These so-called devout Christians do not look past Bone Spur's atrocities. They either do not believe them, dismissing them as fake news, or they condone them. Simple. Story 97. If you have concepts of a plan, They will let you get away with anything. Story 98. A common saying is God works in mysterious ways as a way to validate whatever is happening. They have no responsibility or agency because this is what God wanted. Story 99. Not religious nor a supporter of Make America Great Again. Just here to say you should try asking that on X, Facebook, or Truth Social. Story 100. The words you are looking for are hatred, especially of gay and transgender people, and fascism. Actually, it is not that complicated. Story 101. You are not going to get a single real answer. Moderators really need to remove these questions. Story 102. Many people who call themselves Christians do not truly follow the faith. Similarly, a majority of Jewish and Muslim individuals may also disregard the teachings of their religions if it benefits them personally. Story 103. These people do not reason themselves into their beliefs. They want, feel, or fear something and rationalize their beliefs to fit. They have no code, no maxims, no strongly held beliefs that sometimes require sacrifice to uphold. They are the mob, pure and simple. Gather enough of them together and they will put others in camps, dehumanize them, and praise the leader who tells them what they want to hear. This is not a Ask Not Kennedy age. It is a disregard for others' age. Story 104. You are asking on Reddit for a devout Christian who supports Donald Trump on Reddit. Do I have that correct? Story 105. Not a supporter of Donald Trump myself, but I have observed a lot. A significant issue is that many American Protestants assume a two kingdoms theology adapted from Martin Luther. Essentially, they divide reality into two realms, the spiritual kingdom and the civil kingdom. God rules over all, but the spiritual kingdom is the focus of Christian discipleship and formation. When Jesus tells us to forgive our enemies, that guidance is meant for individuals as part of their allegiance to the spiritual kingdom. It is not intended for the civic realm, where nations are given the power of the sword by God to enact justice according to natural law and reason. This explains why an individual Christian might emphasize the importance of turning the other cheek when personally wronged but also support destroying entire cities in war. Some people will give the shirt off their back to a migrant struggling to cross the border, yet also support the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement removing families from their homes because it is the law. In short, many do not consider the negative things he has done or said. In their view, he is either a new Christian or someone like Nebuchadnezzar whom God will use despite poor character. As president, he is not bound to act according to the Sermon on the Mount, only individuals are. Story 106. Not a Christian nor a supporter, but I suspect some of them are not aware of his transgressions. Story 107. Generally speaking, one would simply be less devout to suit. They will go to hell for worshiping a false god. But Story 108. Christians is not possessive in this usage. That is all. Story 109. The last truly good person to hold the office was Jimmy Carter. He was a wonderful human being but a horrible president. Story 110. If there was someone who was a bad person but gave us universal health care, free college, and universal basic income, I would probably be more forgiving that he was a complete fool. The same applies to conservatives and Donald Trump, except he supports harmful policies. Story 111. The priest at my older brother's parish said that both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were bad candidates, so I think that says a lot. Story 112. My whole family supports that person, and they all say the same thing. We are all allowed to make mistakes and God forgives everyone. Story 113. The majority of every religious group supports him, except liberal and conservative Jews, and those with no religious affiliation. It is the intersection of identity and irrationality. Story 114. Power and lust for money is the reason. It is always the reason. Hiding behind religion is obvious. Story 115. Just like Jesus, the story goes, he is not perfect, but he is putting his life on the line for the American people. I dislike Donald Trump. Story 116. My grandparents are stereotypical proud Christian nationalists. No matter what evidence I show them, no matter what Bible passages I quote, they eventually fall back to the classic, that was a witch hunt, or he didn't really do that. If you press them even further, it is Kamala would have been worse. Story 117. I have a friend who is deeply involved in Christianity. He believes God puts people in charge for a reason. I asked him if that reason might be, you made your choices, so you face the consequences. He did not like that idea and refused to discuss the issue further. Story 118. The real answer is that anyone who supports Donald Trump is not a Christian or devout Christian. They are fake Christian racists. Real Christians speak against this person and his enablers. Story 119. Came here just to see how many people commented that were not supporters. Leaving satisfied. Story 120. Those people are not Christians. They co-opted the title to play victim. They are as far from Christian as possible. If Jesus showed up today, not only would they try to deport him, but he would not recognize them as the people they claim to be. Story 121. I grew up going to church with my family. I don't go anymore, but my father is a devout Christian. He is a missionary and Pentecostal. At the start, in 2016, both sets of my family, secular and non-secular, were supportive of Donald Trump for different reasons. My dad, who goes to church and takes Christian-based vacations, said the Republicans are the Christian-based party. Trump says he is a Christian. Look, today we both talk about how much we dislike him for attacking our country, Canada. He is a winter visitor, for the record. We find him disgusting as a fake Christian. I even comment on how many people in the United States are fake Christians and follow him, drinking every weekend and asking for forgiveness every weekend. To me and my family, means you are not a Christian. He supports Israel but hates Donald Trump. My stepfather liked him because he thought he would be a businessman and change things up, the classic lines we all heard. We both now talk about how much of a fool he is. He didn't last as long as my dad. My father only supported him for maybe the first 2 years of his first term. Thankfully, I remember watching the debates with both sets of parents and calling the man a moron. Things are changing for the better. My entire family is now on the same page, which feels nice after so many years. He really upset us here. Even if you did not like Justin Trudeau, he was right on this. A quote from the British Broadcasting Corporation. When trying to define their national identity, Trudeau said Canadians are likely to say we're not Americans, among other things. End of rant. I got a bit sidetracked. I just love my home. We are not perfect, but it is not yours. Story 122. GOP Jesus. Story 123. They believe there is a magical man in the sky whom they worship despite him causing immense suffering to humans. He will send you into a burning pit of fire for all eternity for disobeying him, but he loves you at the same time. If that does not remind you of someone they would have an affinity for, then I do not know what to tell you. Story 124. Has an actual supporter of Donald Trump ever answered one of these questions? Story 125. My ex-friends say, he says he is a Christian, and you cannot judge him because you do not know his heart. He also hates abortion and shows favoritism to Christians. Story 126. Devout Christianity and Christian nationalism require blind faith to start with conclusions and work backward to justify the imposed decision. Story 127. None of those people are here as others have said. They do not know how to read. Story 128. The vast majority of these people do not truly have faith. Unless they are very gullible, they do not believe what is written in the scriptures. Religion is just an organization like the Ku Klux Klan, a political party, or a trade union. It is a tool to assert power, assemble with like-minded people, and ostracize the rest of the population. They like Donald Trump because he advances their agenda. Also, just like a religious person, Donald Trump does not care about facts. He makes up his own truth just like religious people do. Story 129. Go to your local church and ask. You will not get any real answers here. Story 130. The bottom line is that they are in such desperate need of community that they will allow him to do literally anything. Story 131. Because either they do not actually practice what they preach and use Christianity as a shield for criticism, or they support what he does regardless of religion. Story 132. Personally, I do not see how you can be a devout Christian and follow Donald Trump. He embodies everything the Bible preaches against. Story 133. They are fine with it. You cannot convince me that there is a single church-going Christian who pays anything more than lip service. Story 134. I am not really a Christian anymore, but if you read the Bible, you will find all kinds of bad actors doing ultimately good works. We are all sinners, and most of us have fallen short. It is really more about what moves things the way you want them to go than who is doing the moving. Story 135. Not sure how to post a picture, so just imagine an ostrich with its head in the ground. That is how the ones I know treat it. Story 136. Absent an option without sin, you pick from what is available. Story 137. Same way I look past the calories in pizza. Selective vision. Story 138. Most members of the Democratic Party decided that arming and funding an ongoing livestream genocide was not a deal breaker for them. How is it hard to understand that sexual assault and probable pedophilia are not deal breakers for conservative individuals? Story 139. Indisputable facts. Several businesses went bankrupt, was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, owned a modeling agency and teen beauty pageant, had several divorces, cheated on wives, engaged with prostitutes, promoted cryptocurrencies that are now worthless. Many from his inner circle have gone to jail. Several of his lawyers have been disbarred, charged with more than 90 felony indictments, convicted on 34, impeached twice. These are all facts. This has nothing to do with political affiliation. I cannot think of a more disgusting, vile person, and yet he is President of the United States. Story 140. Most Americans are not that smart. They do not read. They do not think critically. They let political fearmongers influence their votes, and they base everything on tribalism. Story 141. Because they have to support the Antichrist for the prophecy to come true. Story 142. They just cover their eyes and repeat. He is a Christian. He is one of us. Story 143. How far am I going to have to scroll before seeing a realistic answer? Story 144. Christianity has always been a scapegoat, something used to justify almost any action, no matter how deplorable. It is something people can accuse to gain corrupt government protection. It is literally about appearances, not actions. Story 145. Hey, I have an idea. How about we stop giving these people a platform? Story 146. They are all desperately searching their religious texts for a defense of the former president. Story 147. How do you look past all the things? Because you are not a Christian in any meaningful sense. Story 148. Single-issue voters, that is, those focused on being pro-life or supporting God in schools. Considering a priest is accused of molesting another child in church seemingly every other day in the news, support for Donald Trump is not a big leap. Story 149. I asked my very devout Christian mom this question. She said that Donald Trump is there to bring about the end times. He is the catalyst. When I asked her how she reconciled worshiping a false idol against the Ten Commandments and voting for the Antichrist as depicted in her own Bible, she was adamant that she would be one of the chosen ones. My takeaway is that you cannot reason with someone who believes in this kind of supernatural belief. Story 150. I have spoken with an evangelical Christian for the past 5 years on and off about politics. The answer is they are completely brainwashed and have a white supremacist agenda disguised as biblical. Honestly, it has given me less hope. I thought I could try to make good points, but they hide behind conspiracy theories. They deny any facts about Donald Trump and claim everything is a conspiracy to get Christians. We are doomed. Story 151. I reject your premise that they need to look past anything. They are fully on board with it. Story 152. Devout Christians want an authoritarian theocracy based on their version of what they believe the Bible says. This is no different from what many in the Middle East have done. It is not Donald Trump. These same people supported George W. Bush, John McCain, and many other presidents and candidates before. Do not let them fool you into thinking this is some new movement or support base. Story 153. Not sure that devout Christian and Trump supporter are as big an overlap as you think. His base is made up of overwhelmingly megachurch political entertainment Christians and Christmas Easter warriors. The overlap between people who really study their Bible and Donald Trump's core base is likely very small. Story 154. It is all in the Kool-Aid, I think. It is orange and bitter, but they seem to like it. Story 155. My own mother condones his policies, and she tells me I do not go to church enough. I tell her she is a hypocrite. Story 156. American Christian here. My first loyalty is to Christ, but in the body politic, I have always voted for policy and positions, not personality. Name the last morally pure presidential candidate we have had in this country. I'll wait. Also, when you go back to things a person said 20 years ago and make the leap that it is still their position, you are removing what all liberals claim they believe in, people being able to grow and mature, changing their positions. As long as it is a singular direction, change is very possible. What bugs me is when a person's position changes according to their audience or goes back and forth from oppose to support to oppose, etc. I do not see that in our current president. My opinion based on my observations. Story 157. Social media has created echo chambers and real fake news. People believed false information strongly enough for January 6th to happen. Brainwashing is real, friends. Story 158. I'm Christian. I cannot stand the man for obvious reasons. However, I know Christians who support him. If you mention any aspect of his personal life, they either dismiss it by saying nobody is perfect or claim the accusations are unproven. When you bring up things he has literally said, they often become quiet or respond with, "What about Joe Biden?" I believe that, deep down, they know he is an awful person, but he is seen as a means to an end. They feel patriotic, view him as a way to address illegal immigration, and a way to enrich themselves through tax cuts. When you ask how any of those things are Christian, the response usually involves obeying the law and the belief that the government should not take people's money. When you mention how he broke the law, they say the justice system is rigged. Story 159. I asked my father this a while ago, and he said the Bible has many examples of God using imperfect people to do his work. Since he believes what Donald Trump is doing is right for America and Christians, the man can be the biggest sinner ever, and it is still a blessing to us all. Story 160. The Sumerians had words for all-seeing eye and informants. They were a surveillance state where the populace informed on each other, and the ruling elites used that information against the populace, convincing them they were all-knowing, all-seeing gods. The populace worshipped them. That is why we have 5,000 years of religion. America, as a surveillance state, wants you to have freedom to worship the elites of the surveillance state as all-knowing, all-seeing gods. Therefore, Donald Trump is considered the leader of the American surveillance state, for better or worse. It is important that you understand this. Story 161. Megas never admit that they have done anything wrong. What is totally immoral to me is totally acceptable to them, just to let you know how deplorable they are. Story 162. What things? Never underestimate the power of denial. Story 163. Because Trump is the Jesus they think they worship and therefore is their Antichrist, which makes them the Pharisees Jesus actually got legitimately angry at and who ultimately crucified him. Story 164. The same way they overlook all the things they have done and said. Story 165. It's exactly what my family does. Look past it all. There is a difference between ignorance and ignoring. Story 166. They praise a God who murdered most of the world, and the devil is considered evil because he gave knowledge to Adam and Eve. They have no morals. Story 167. Because most of them are hypocrites who pick the scripture they want to spew. There are many pedophiles involved in religion and will continue to be, so they elect someone to protect their own kind. Plus, they are all unintelligent. Story 168. It is easy. They worship the flag-waving, brown people-hating American Jesus. Story 169. I swear some of you read the Bible like it is a choose-your-own-adventure book. Jesus flipped tables in the temple once, and suddenly every Make America Great Again uncle thinks that gives Donald Trump a free pass to roast people on Twitter and cheat on his wives. Where in Corinthians does it say, "Thou shalt grab them by the..." Story 170. Their entire lives have been based on selecting pieces of information while completely ignoring others. They are doing the same with Donald Trump. Story 171. In this thread, top-level posts are made by everyone except the original poster. It is important to note the responder's reading comprehension issues. Story 172. False information. And do not prove me wrong because that is false information as well. Story 173. My uncle is a devout Christian who fully supports Donald Trump. He knows Trump lacks morals but fights for the policies he agrees with, so at the end of the day, that is all that matters. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.